All right. So this is our first one, and we'll come up with a name for whatever this show is later. But
Yeah.
this is the Max Strength guys, and we're gonna talk hitting today, and we're gonna talk what we track as KPIs for hitters at our facility. Um, obviously, like the data-driven revolution has come and is here to stay,
Yep.
and we're just trying to ride that wave. But I think that one thing that a lot of people do is they don't really fully understand the data that they're gathering, and they don't really know how to make sense of it and communicate that to their athletes so that there are useful insights for the athletes. Like, you take an athlete and you hand them a bunch of data from an off season of training, and they're like, okay, what does this mean to me? What
Yeah.
am I supposed to do with this information? How does this educate my approach moving forward training?
hmm
And I think that that's something that we've done a really good job of. So I'd love to communicate, what we look at, why it's important, and how we communicate that to our athletes, and probably for the benefit of some of those baseball parents out there as
Yeah.
well.
hmm
And for those of you who don't know, this is Aaron Brush. Aaron Brush is one of our directors of hitting development here at Max Strength. He's been working with us since summer of 2022.
Yep.
Is that correct?
June, so
June.
11 months.
11 months. We're almost
Yeah.
coming up on an anniversary. We'll have to have a party.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So and Brush, to tell for the benefit of somebody watching may know a little bit about me. Who cares about me? Tell them a little bit more about your background personally, where you first, what your baseball career was like, and where you got educated on some of this stuff initially.
Yeah. So back in high school, I was in the first group of Max Strength.
He's an OG.
Yep. Very OG. So I've always played baseball throughout my life, played three sports, and started pursuing baseball sophomore year of high school very intentionally. Was here working out, hitting almost every single day, Monday through Friday. And at that time, Mac and Jess, she would do yogas on Fridays. Love that. But uh, senior year, waited recruiting wise, waited till 2 months uh, before school started. Committed to Towson University, which is a small D1 out in Baltimore, Maryland. Played there for a year. New head coach, so wanted his guys, but respected. I mean, it's part of the process.
Mm-hmm.
And then went down to a JUCO uh, down in Beatrice, Nebraska, 45 minutes south of Lincoln. Played there for a year. Much different than the NCAA. And don't want to get too much into it, but completely different world.
Yeah, for sure.
And then my last 3 years played at Concordia St. Paul, close to home. Great group of guys. Coach is super nice. But then I forewent my uh, senior year of playing. Decision that I had. Wanted to get more on the administrative side of baseball, and I love data.
Mm-hmm.
Um, love that side of looking at the numbers and being like, oh, well, if I do this, like projecting wise, I thought that was super interesting. And with the revolution of data analytics in baseball, I mean, I love it. So
Yeah. And so you went and you did, it was an internship, right?
yes,
With, what was the company?
Sports Info Solutions.
Sports Info Solutions. And
Yep.
your job at that internship was essentially to watch baseball games and track what happened in the baseball games. It was like
Yep.
it was like keeping book for the game, but in a more advanced
Much
level, right?
sophisticated way, yeah.
Yeah. And so one thing I want to cover, and don't let me forget to come back to this, is
Yes.
what some of these major league organizations were wanting to track
Mm-hmm.
about their hitters' performances, and how that contrasts to what we track in like a training setting.
Yep.
And so, because a lot of times I think what I've talked about and what I've communicated to people is that if you want to really know if your hitting program, your off-season hitting program that you're running works, you kind of have to wait. You kind of have to wait until they play a season and see how they perform on the field during a season. And it's difficult for especially private sector businesses to really like sell the results of their program
Yep.
because you can say like, oh, we improved all these metrics, but then if that player goes out and doesn't play well, did your hitting program really work? And
Mm-hmm.
honest, if we're really honest with ourselves, the answer is no. And so we obviously have valued that for years. If you can recall, like the early days of Max Strength, we didn't track much measurable information with hitters at all, right? Because that was our message. Our message was like, you got to go be good in the game,
Mm-hmm.
right? And what we were trying to educate hitters on was how do I go do that? How do I go outside of this place and perform better in the game, rather than just improving some of these things that we can measure. But I
Mm-hmm.
think that
Yeah.
as we've moved forward, and as we didn't have some of the technology back then that we do now, and I think now that we have some of the more technology, we are able to sort of marry those two philosophies, and we were starting to nail down some performance indicators that do hopefully transfer a little bit more directly to in-game performance. And
Mm-hmm.
I think this was our first off season where we tracked some of these very closely. Last off season we tracked some of this stuff. I guess you could say casually, but we're starting to get a little bit more serious into it. And I think that so far, at least with our high school athletes playing in their season, it looks like we were correct about the way that some of this stuff was going to transfer. So
Yeah.
so let's rattle them off,
Okay.
and then let's talk about each one individually. You list them out, Brush.
So the first one that we look at, so for background a little bit, Luke Roscom and I, one of the professional guys that trains here at Max Strength and a coach,
Mm-hmm.
we went through kind of a checklist that we wanted each high schooler to look at on the hit tracks. And if you don't know what hit tracks is, basically
Then you're
just
living under a rock.
it's a machine that just records data, looks at flight of ball, how hard you hit it. But yeah, it records you hitting. And in the hit track system, we were able to put different people's names in, and we could individually look at different people's stats instead
Mm-hmm.
of just doing a kind of bigger batting practice. So for the best hitting kind of KPIs that Luke and I came up with, the first one is hard hit average, or HHA, max exit velo, average exit velo, bat speed, and line drive percentage. And the main three that Luke and I focused on throughout the winter was HHA, line drive percentage, and average exit velo.
Yeah.
And with this stuff, so to get into HHA, or hard hit average, it takes your max exit velo and it takes 10% of it. So,
The 90% of it.
well,
10% below your max.
yes, correct.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I'm just going to use Roscom as an example because I worked with him throughout the winter. So Roscom's top exit velo was 102, and he had to sit anywhere between 91.5 on to get that hard hit average up. And what that hard hit average looks like is it's kind of like batting average, in that it goes up by decimal points, 0.1, 0.2, 0.3. So it looks like just a regular batting average. And what we looked at was, okay, what is a good average where we want these guys to be at?
Mm-hmm.
And if guys sat around 0.45 to about 0.55, they were doing really good. If they were in the 600s, that was phenomenal. Like,
Mm-hmm.
they were squaring balls up, and that's what we wanted them to do.
As an aside, we're always measuring this off of off of our hack attack
Yes.
set at what we consider game speed.
Mm-hmm.
And for a professional hitter like Roscom, game speed was the hack attack is set at, now I could be remembering wrong, but it's 40 feet,
Yep.
right? It's 40 feet, and it's set at like 65 miles an hour.
Anywhere between 58 to 65. 65 is the more hard. I mean, the equivalent, that's 102.
Yeah, so the conversion of 65 at 40 is 102,
Yep.
and the conversion of 58 at
It's like,
40 is like 92, something like
yeah,
that.
92 to 95 somewhere.
Yeah. So, and we do the same with our high school kids. We just keep it below 60 most of the time, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So,
Yep.
most of the time, and is that the peak velocity, or the velocity on the hit tracks that it's crossing the plate at?
It's at the very front of the plate, so
Yeah.
it will come in or it's coming in harder than it
Yes.
really is.
So we use the hit tracks velocity as our proxy for that, right?
Yes,
Yeah, yeah,
correct.
yeah. So we don't track any of these performance measurements off of front toss, tee, or otherwise. Correct.
No, the only two that we do is either BP or machine work. That's it.
Overhand BP thrown by
Yes.
a person.
Yep.
Yeah, that's
Correct.
right. Yeah, you did a lot of that with Roscom, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So um, I think that's a really important note because I think that somebody might hear like, you know, only 600 in your top 10% of exit velocity in batting practice is considered good. What? Yeah,
Yep.
but where this is game speed, and it's difficult to square up, simulating 90 to 100 miles an hour. So,
Yeah.
if we're measuring the hard hit average, we have to measure it in a kind of a consistent sort of environment if we're going to have an accurate pre and post test.
Exactly. And so, and then the next one that Roscoe and I look at, or that we like guys to be in. So line drive percentage. That I know nowadays they talk about hitting fly balls, hitting it in the air, and there is truth to that. Obviously, Josh Donaldson had a mega viral clip go like, if I'm a little league coach and I see you hitting ground balls and taking me out or whatever,
Yeah.
something like that. But for line drive percentage, we want to be hitting it through either the second baseman, shortstop, and that we usually want it to be around. We'd like to see it at 60% or higher, and the ground ball rate stay low. That just kind of shows us kind of where your bat path is at
Mm-hmm.
mechanically wise, and your point of contact as well. Those are kind of two things that when we get these numbers that we look at that are huge to us, and kind of tell that story.
And
But
and let's define too what the launch angle numbers
yep,
that are defined as a line drive is between what and what.
um, most places are different with that. I usually like to keep it between 9% and
9 degrees.
9 degrees.
Yeah,
Yeah,
nine.
thank you. 9 degrees and about 29 degrees.
Okay.
Anywhere above 30 is getting a little bit too under the ball. Like 32, like that is probably where I cut it off the most.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, 9 degrees to 32 degrees.
Yeah, and to me, like 20 degrees is still a fairly wide window.
Yes.
And so it's not like you're defining line drive because I think the old school approach was like, remember when it was just hit it off the back net, keep it off the roof, right?
Yep.
But that was like the blanket rule of every hitting coach, no matter what cage you were in.
Yep.
And so like your margin for error on hitting it off the back net, off the ground, off the roof is like what, 5 degrees, 4, maybe less even. I mean, some of these cages that have lower ceilings, like you can't you're hitting it in like a 3 degree window to
Yep.
hit it off the back net without hitting the roof or the floor, right? And so a 20-degree window is still, in all practical purposes, like a realistic expectation, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And the definition of a line drive, people will picture like parallel to the ground, right? But that's like
Yes.
it's in the air.
Yeah.
A 29-degree launch angle is a double in the gap.
Oh yeah.
And yes, hitting the ball at like 32 degrees, if you have enough juice, will get the ball out of the yard, right? But the thing is, if you're training high school kids, if you're training youth baseball players, not all these guys are going to even have the juice to get it out of the yard, and
Mm-hmm.
can you develop it? Yeah, of
Of
course,
course you can.
right?
Yeah.
But like, you can't just train them to hit at a certain launch angle all the time and be like, yeah, when you develop power, it'll be great. Well, in the meantime, they're going to suck.
Yep.
Like what are we talking about here? So I do think that one of the best things I think that you guys did was define that range for guys and help them understand that like, you're not trying to launch homers, you're trying to drive the baseball, hit it far,
Yep.
don't hit it high. And it's a very important distinction that you guys made for a lot of those guys. And
Mm-hmm.
you get a guy in there and he's hitting the ball at his max exit velocity is like 88 because he's 13 or 14. I mean, he's really talented at that age, but he's not leaving the yard to dead center.
No.
So why train him to be hitting the ball at 40 degrees?
Yeah. There's no really purpose to that. Well, I shouldn't say no purpose to that, but it's just, I mean, you want him to get development over those years because he's so young instead of oh, let's see how many home runs you can hit this year instead of.
Yeah, I mean it's a mistake that's made probably pretty often where people train for this like theoretical next level, right? Well,
Yep.
you know, this is what the type of hitter you're going to want to be
Hmm.
in 5 years. It's like, well, you have to play well and have success in the interim. So if you build a hitter to play in a way that's going to cause him to have failure from now until then he may not even get to the then that you're training for.
Exactly.
You know, you have to have success at each incremental level as you go up,
Yep.
right? So yeah, so 9 degrees and 29 degrees, line drive percentage 60% or more. and
Yep.
and when we say 60% or more, we're talking about this is probably, we should probably back up and for hard hit average too, like if it's 5 or 600 or more, we're talking about like within a session, right?
Yes. Yes.
So now with a session can be really anything,
Hmm.
right? Because it's a percentage and it's all relative, right? So if you hit and you go and you hit 25 swings, we want it to be at 50, 60%. If you go and you hit 100 swings, we still want it to be at 50 or 60%,
Yep.
right? Yeah. So, all right, what's next? We talked about, you mentioned exit velocity.
Yep. So the next one, kind of the big three. The last one is average exit velo. And that one is pretty important because that means that you are squaring up the ball and that your point of contact is there. And to clarify more of point of contact is the optimal point of hitting the ball is just inside your front foot of your
Mm-hmm.
swing. Um, Kind of means that you've backed the ball up, but in a way you're still out in front getting to the ball.
Mm-hmm.
And that seeing that is super important. Obviously, we break that down with video to get more of a understanding of where that is for guys. But go back to average exit velo. We'd like to see you kind of hitting in a relative area. I mean, for some guys, it might be um, hitting 88 miles an hour. Exit velo every single swing. It could be higher than that, lower that, but staying kind of in that range. Obviously, it fluctuates with every swing. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
if you get one out in front and it's 60 miles an hour, it's going to drop that. But we kind of, after every session, it kind of gives you that um, number of, okay, when I was swinging, how hard was I hitting that? So that is the last big one that we look at when looking at the hit tracks.
Yeah. So let's clarify this a little bit, because I think that, like, to a to a person who isn't as familiar with this, they're going to hear hard hit average and average exit velocity
Yep.
as being almost the same thing, right?
Yep.
But if we stop and we start to understand like the statistics and how averages are calculated, you could go and you could have a 50%, a 500 session
Yep.
for hard hit average. You know, 50% of your swings were inside the top 10% of your best exit velocity. But your
Correct.
average exit velocity could be a lot of different things based off of what the ones that were outside, what that other half of your swings were,
Yep.
right? If you're fouling them off or hitting them very weakly, right? So if you're a feast or famine kind of hitter, your average exit velocity might be actually surprisingly low,
Yep.
right? If I'm a guy, my max exit velocity is 100 miles per hour, and I go and I get half my swings, I have a 50 swing session, 25 of them are above 90 miles an hour. But the 25 that were not above 90 miles an hour are hit real poorly. My average exit velocity, because I had 25 of them that were 90 to 100,
Yep.
and then I had 25 of them that were like 45, my average exit velocity is going to be like 60,
Yep.
right? It's going to be low. It's going to be, and it's not going to look so good, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that we had to educate a lot of these guys on was, you have to make sure that the ones that even the ones that you're not hitting inside your top 10%,
Mm-hmm.
you're not hitting your absolute best, those balls are still hit well. They're still hit with authority. Those are, if you're a guy
That's
who's going to hit
correct.
doubles and homers, those are your singles,
Mm-hmm.
right? I'm going to hit a ball at 85 miles an hour, and it's not going to count towards my hard hit average, but it's still hit firm. It's hit with authority. I hit a line drive over the second baseman's head, or a line drive over the shortstop's head for a single,
Mm-hmm.
right? Those are good hitters. Those are the things that I think, and this is, we talked a little bit about how you had to wait around, right? the combination of these two things, both being good, is I think part of what produces a hitter that has a high batting average, right? You know, you
Exactly.
and slugging for that matter, right?
Yep.
Like I'm going to hit doubles especially if you're a high school kid playing on a turf field, mind you, you're going to have doubles that are going to be outside your top 10% if you're hitting it, because you could be just outside,
Yep.
right? If your top 10% cutoff is 90 miles an hour, you hit a ball at 89, doesn't count towards the hard hit average, but you bet that ball is hit hard,
Yep.
categorically
Hmm.
hard enough that it's going to be something in a game that's going to be good. It's going to be a good result,
Yeah.
right? And so, I think that average exit velocity layered on top of the hard hit average helped us a lot develop guys that were not 5 o'clock hitters.
Agreed.
Guys who know how to control their barrel and find the barrel, even on balls that aren't their top upper echelon of batted balls.
Hmm.
Um, and so those three, and this is why I was so excited to talk about this, because the combination of those three metrics, the line drive percentage, the hard hit average, and the average exit velocity in a session, is I think the indication of, if you watch a guy hit and he has those three numbers all really good during that session, you're going to walk away from that even without knowing those numbers, knowing that was a good session.
Yep.
That guy rakes. That was impressive, right?
Hmm.
It passes the eye test, the gut test, if
Yep.
you're watching a hitter hit. And those are definitely, and this is what was really fun for me as, the guy who, I've been coaching hitters for a long time, but I didn't educate myself on all this stuff at a real depth. I was aware of it. I didn't have the tech, so I was like, whatever. I got the tech, but I still was like, we'll just use it as a, as a group thing.
Hmm.
We would stop at the end of a practice and we'd be like, look, you guys, this was your group average, but it wasn't as useful for the individual hitter as you and Roscom built, and that was really great.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the fourth and the fifth one, because I think that's that the last two include one that I think most people think of, right? And that's max exit velocity,
Yep.
right?
Oh, yeah.
Most people think about increasing your maximum exit velocity when they think about a KPI for a hitter, and that's fourth on our list,
Yep.
right? That's our fourth most important one. Um, let's talk about why that's fourth most important, and like how we look at that and how it affects like your ability to hit in like a real practical way.
Yeah. So, I mean, max exit velo, how we saw it was it's like pitchers when they're throwing off a mound or they're doing their pull downs. It's kind of a testing number to see, like, hey, when you are at your absolute best, or you take your best swing, like what does that look like? And that's a number that we were like, okay, let's see what these guys. I mean, we have a couple guys in here with over 100 miles an hour max exit velos, and we're just like, that's great. Like when this person is at their best, this is what they can give us.
Mm-hmm.
And it's more of just a testing number. And when we look at it, we're like, okay, like this guy has really developed. Um, and it's kind of just to see where guys are at.
Mm-hmm.
But um,
I'll add to that too. The other thing is that like the rising tide lifts all of the other things, in the sense that if my 100%, if my absolute best goes up, then whatever my 80% is also goes up,
yep.
right? And so that's the biggest argument to train, like, um, when we talk about it with pitchers, when Alex and I work with our pitchers and we talk about the pull downs and how they fit in to our program and our max effort throws and how that fits in, that's how we always explain it. We're like, what we're doing is we're raising your ceiling, but we're hopefully raising your floor by doing this as well, because if your 100% best goes up, then whatever 90% of that is also moving, right, by definition. And so
Yep.
hopefully you have a hitter whose miss hits are now harder hit than they would have been otherwise.
Hmm.
And yeah, and like you said, it's a good way to kind of know like where this guy is at and sort of what kind of category he's in. I mean, it's definitely true to say, like from a recruiting perspective, there are sort of thresholds that you have to be over in terms of your capability if you want to play at a
Yep.
certain level, right?
Yes.
Like if you want to play Power 5 Division 1 baseball, but your maximum best exit velocity is 89, you're
It's
just
not
not
looking
you're
good.
not in the window,
Yep.
right? You're not over the threshold,
Mhm.
right? If your max, but the other side of that coin though, that we talked about, you and I talked about this pretty recently. Like if your max exit velocity is 105, but your other numbers stink. Like if your hard hit average every session is 200, and your average exit velocity is like 60% of your best,
Yep.
then congratulations, you got a lot of bat speed, but you're not a good hitter.
Yep.
And so I think that is the best way I can explain
Mhm.
why it's our fourth most important thing.
Yeah.
Because in order to be a truly good hitter, you can't just have the ability to swing the bat fast. You got to actually go
Yeah.
hit.
Yep.
And that's like a duh. It's so glib. It's so glib to say that shit. But
Yeah.
like, people are like, "Oh, well, you think?" But it gets missed, man. It gets
Yeah.
missed.
I mean, max exit velo is important, but it's more so of just kind of that testing number to see what you said, like what window do you fit in? Because I mean, we have had guys come in here, and yeah, I mean they max exit velo is 97, or they're PRing at like 95, but their hard hit average is 300, and their line drive rate is at like 40, and it's like, okay, like you're close, but like you need to figure some things out. So
And by the way, we never measure this off a tee.
correct,
Basically never.
correct.
We
Now,
we only we measure it off of it. Okay, I lied a little. We measure it off a tee every now and then if we know a guy is going to a showcase where they're going to do it.
yes,
Where we're like, all right, let's practice this stupid crap where you can game the system a little bit and get a really high score, so you're prepared to measure that. But
tee's only to warm up, get loose a little bit.
for us,
yeah.
like for our purposes, we don't care. Like
Yeah.
the tee exit velocity means jack
No,
all to
because
us.
then you're just swinging down and trying to get the ball on the ground as quick
Yeah.
as possible.
Yeah, I know guys that can hit balls hard off a tee, and they strike out in slow pitch softball.
Yep.
All right, so like, yeah, well, let's slow your roll a little bit before you get too hot and
Just a little
lathered up about that guy's 105 off the tee.
Yeah.
Come on. So,
But I mean, it's a number that looks nice if it's very high. I mean,
yeah, it's
you'll
good.
get guys will be like, "Oh, nice!" Like,
Yeah, well, at least you know it's in there.
yes,
At least
exactly.
you know it's like, okay, we're working with something that has potential.
Mm-hmm.
If he does struggle to putting up the other numbers, but he's got it's in there where you're like, he runs into one and it's 102, you're like, okay, there's a potential if we can bring these other skills up.
Yep.
We're gonna have something that's pretty dangerous here.
Yes. Agreed.
Okay. Last one. What did we say? Bat speed?
Bat speed.
Bat speed.
So bat speed, we use this tiny device. I would assume most people know what blast motion is.
Mm-hmm.
We use a Diamond Kinetics.
Same thing. Yeah.
Basically the same thing.
Just a different brand.
Yep. And with bat speed, how I look at that, it helps me see where your bat is getting through the zone, your point of contact, but also like when it pitches up and in, like you're getting to that ball.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, bat speed is important. I mean, once you're facing higher velocity, you're going to need bat speed, because if there's going to be, I mean, for these high schoolers, a 92-mile-an-hour fastball up and in,
Mm-hmm.
like and you're swinging at it. I mean, you better have some good bat speed to get to it.
Yeah.
And for that, those numbers, looking between 50 to 60, and it really just depends on the guy. I mean, I would like it to be high 50s. The elite guys are going to be more on like the 60 side.
Mm-hmm.
But
one thing I think is interesting about bat speed is I think a lot of people assume that the bat is moving as fast or faster than the ball. If the pitch is thrown at 90 miles an hour, I think that a lot of people assume that the bat's moving at 90 or higher.
Yeah.
But it's just not it's not the case. It's moving like when I published my study for my master's thesis and I measured bat speed, I remember being surprised at how low some of the numbers were on some of my teammates who were good college baseball players. It's like 48, 52. And I'm like, looking at it and going like, this can't be right. But across the board, it was the same. So, and then throughout the process of writing the paper, you have to do all the extra research and, you look up and you see what like major league averages are, and it's surprisingly low based off of what I think the intuitive assumption of most fans is.
Yep.
Um, on that same note, just like how we talked about how hard hit average and average exit velocity sound like the same thing, bat speed and max exit velocity kind of sound like the same thing,
Yes.
but they're cousins, right? Just like those other two numbers and measurements are, but they're not the same thing, because if you have a guy who has an elite bat speed, but he has trouble producing an elite exit velocity, that tells us something about his bat path, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. And I mean, and everything kind of coincides with himself. I mean, because the three things that we look for when we're looking at all five of these things is point of contact, mechanics, and then rhythm and timing. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
those three things tell us like what's happening and give us that story when we're looking at all five of those numbers.
Yeah. Now, how do you guys when you're first introducing like a high school hitter
Yep.
to some of this, how do you frame that? Like, what do you how do you connect this to explain it in the way where you say like, this is why this is important to you and this is why you should care?
Yeah. I mean, so kind of dumbing it down. Well, I shouldn't say dumbing down, but to like give it to high schoolers and how we give that out. I mean, more so like with hard hit average. I mean, that's basically the first one that we kind
Mm-hmm.
of been like, hey, this one is very, very important. And it's more so of like, we want you to sit in kind of your average exit velo, um, where I mean, if you're hitting it between 85 to 87, like if you can sit in there, like we want you to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But more so, I mean, we just kind of when new guys come in, it's more of like a trial, and then uh, kind of just let them figure it out a little bit on their own, just to see like, okay, because it shows up green whenever you're
Mm-hmm.
um, in those percentages.
Yeah, the
But
hit tracks really streamlines the teaching of this, because you can just point number like green, good,
yep,
red, bad.
bad.
And it's nice that the interface of the hit tracks lends itself to that so easily, for
Yeah,
sure.
and when most guys come in, they just look for max exit velo. They look back, oh, I hit it that hard this time. Oh, I need to hit it hard this time, and it's more of like, no, like, yes, those numbers are important, but we also want you looking at these three things,
Mm-hmm.
because this is, I mean, because I mean, you could be getting around the ball or hooking it as hard as you can and hitting it 95, and you're
Mm-hmm.
like, oh my gosh, my swing is amazing,
Mm-hmm.
but you could be hitting 89 up the middle,
Mm-hmm.
and like your swing is 10 times better than the swing you took at 95.
Yeah.
So,
I'm glad you said that, because I wanted to segue this into somehow, I wanted to segue this into talking about how we use the spray chart.
yep.
Because the spray chart isn't so much something that you can measure like a quantity, it's more of a qualitative assessment.
Yep.
And so one thing that I think is really cool is when you guys have a guy that's hitting really well, and I'll go in there and I'll look at the spray chart, and it's like this X,
Yep.
or I guess it's more like a Y, because it's not so much I guess it is sometimes an X, because a lot of times their mishits will be kind of like
Yep.
pulled, but it's mostly like you guys have these dudes driving it to these gaps, and it's all those blue dots because they land on the hit tracks simulation.
Yeah.
But how do you guys how do you layer the spray chart on top of these numbers in order to educate a guy like, am I really hitting well, or am I not? Because I think um, for me, when I first started using the hit tracks to coach guys,
Mm-hmm.
my instinct went to the spray chart,
Yeah.
because that was the window for me, is like, oh, I've hit in a cage my whole life. I've been coaching hitters for years. I have an eye for what a ball hit in the cage is going to do out on the field. I can sort of, in my mind's eye, I can extrapolate that past the net and imagine what that flight of ball is.
Yep.
A younger kid who's 13 to 18 may not have enough repetition to be able to recognize that. And so that was the biggest window that the hit tracks opened up for me as an instructor, is like you can say like, look, that's what those balls are actually doing in terms of like a spray chart perspective. That's where they end up on the field.
Yep.
And so when I was first using it, I wasn't so much talking about the quantitative. It was more of an opportunity to take the qualitative and communicate that to people with less experience.
Yeah. And so what's nice about the hit tracks is what you said earlier about the simulation. Like you can see the ball flight when you look back and actually see it go to the wall or hit a gap. Um, Getting back to that X that you're talking about, uh, gap to gap is very important. We want to be hitting those power alleys, and it shows that can you can you attack and pull it to how every hitter is. I mean, they have their pull gap,
Mm-hmm.
but can you hit it the other way um, and actually hit it hard? And that is very, very important because that shows that you're using all fields and you're able to stay within your swing
Mm-hmm.
and actually hit it where it's pitched.
Yeah, and by the way, like using all fields is more important at the lower levels than it is at the highest level. I think a lot of people, just like they'll do the launch angle thing,
Yep.
they'll take the approach of a Joey Gallo type of hitter, and they'll apply that to like a high schooler. But what they forget is that the defenders at lower levels aren't as good.
Nope.
The amount of at bats that they get is way lower. I mean, it's astronomically lower. The amount of at bats you get in a major league season could be the amount of at bats that some of these kids get in their entire career.
Yeah.
If they play 4 years of college baseball, then they'll surpass it. But dude, the sample size is so much lower that you can't go to the plate with an approach of like, yeah, man, just turn and burn, and it'll average out in the end because you'll hit your 50 jacks and you'll drive in 100, and there's your $1 million contract. Kids don't even get 50 at bats in some of these spring seasons in some
Nope.
places, so you can't take that approach, and so you're driving the ball to all fields becomes that much more important because of the sample size, and then the fact that the defenders aren't as good. You're trying to drive the ball to less fields at the high level because you can't get away. You're not going to get as many things to fall.
Yep. I mean, and obviously with like your miss hits are going to be more of your ground balls, the ones that you yank or little pop flies that you miss hit. But no, I would agree to the point. I mean, just with the amount of ABs, I mean, you're not gonna get the result that you quite want just because I mean, guy in the MLB is taking almost 800 ABs
Mm-hmm.
in a year, and then yeah, 50 to 100. But
I mean, it's insane. I mean, it's really insane if you really start to compare and contrast. I think that when I was in high school, the kid on my team who hit leadoff, who never walked, got like 80 at bats in the season, and that was like an astronomically high number for
yep,
our high school season. I think that same season, I think I had like 61 at bats or something like that. And so that's that like, and that was a lot more typical for an everyday starter. Somewhere between like 55 and 70 at bats
yeah,
in a high school season. And I know some places in the country play more games, maybe a longer season. And if you combine summer and spring, blah, blah, blah. But the bottom line is like that is a season, start to finish,
uh huh.
and yeah, you can start to combine seasons. Calendar year, you're going to get more. But
I mean, even with your summer teams, your high school teams, I mean, you maybe get half of the ABs that these pro guys
you're not going
get.
to sniff 700.
No,
Not, no, not, no
no
chance.
chance.
And so I think that's a really important perspective. So we said we were going to connect this to what you were looking at for hitters when you were watching the games with the scouting company as an
Yep.
intern. So now obviously some of this stuff has a very like it's got a big like practice and training lens over the top of it,
Hmm.
right? And so when you're watching some of these hitters in their games, what do these organizations care about? What are they having you track? And how does that compare to what we were just talking about?
So with what I did over the summer, so what these teams wanted to see was flight of ball, how long the ball was in the air for, and where it landed. Um, a lot of the other stuff was more pitching side, um, and that was just where the strike was and all that. But
Sure.
um, kind of the bigger things was okay. So we had to chart. We had this like ball field chart in our program that um, say it was a line drive to left field. We had to kind of guesstimate uh, where that ball landed, how long the ball was in the air for, and which fielder fielded it.
Hmm.
So the fly ball to left field, it might be so it'll be an F7.
Hmm.
It fly balls usually tend to range from 10, maybe 10 seconds. Depends on the fly ball. And then where it was. So it could be anywhere from 230 feet to the warning track of like 380. But most of these teams wanted to see that flight of ball because they
Now,
got their numbers from, I mean, the exit velo that was hit, like they could see that at the stadium. Like that stuff they don't necessarily need. It's more so of
yeah, yeah,
the more
yeah.
in
Most of
depth
these
stuff.
stadiums have exit velocity stadium guns now, just like the pitch stadium gun.
Yeah.
So that information is really easy for them to get their hands on. What is the justification behind the organizations wanting to know how long the ball's in the air for?
More so of uh, it can be used for, I would say, kind of that. So the line drive percentage that we had talked about earlier. Where how hard are these balls being hit? Is the guy getting under the ball? Is he on top of it more?
Yeah.
Kind it
Does it have to do with like getting it to carry as well? Like,
Yeah,
are you
just a
back
little
spinning
bit.
the ball or driving it
Yeah,
deep?
it's more, I believe it was never said, but it was more of kind of a mechanical thing
Mm,
and more so of kind of where this guy is. I mean, they never used launch angle there,
mm.
but you could tell that they were kind of indirectly wanting to know that stuff from the information that we gathered.
Yeah, I think that's really fascinating because not only is that sort of like vague in terms of like what it really means,
Hmm.
it's so different than what organizations might have cared about even a decade ago.
Yeah.
Like when I was a kid, the ball being in the air for a long period of time was almost blanket considered a bad thing.
Hmm.
Even at the higher levels, like you would hear announcers on TV talk about like, oh yeah, they're trying to get the ball on the ground, because either they're, not when I say on the ground, I don't mean hitting ground balls. I mean they're trying to get it to land without a fielder catching it,
Yes,
right? And
exactly.
so the culture, like remember like the early 2000s, where the culture of like serving the line drive that would sink and land in front of the
Yep.
outfielders, like that was considered like the best approach at that time,
Hmm.
and that it's almost like the mid-range jumper in the NBA. Like
It's a good
it's
way to look
sort
at it.
of going away in the like the the three pointer in the NBA today is these organizations being like get it in the air for as long as you can.
Yep.
And I think that's really fascinating because it just goes to show that there's groups of people in these front offices that are starting to understand the game in a way that those of us who played it even struggle to understand, because a lot of these people didn't play. They didn't play at a high level.
Yep.
And so they aren't weighed down by biases of somebody who played and had to hear that stuff, and they're not breaking through any of those walls. They're just seeing it objectively for what it is, and they're finding new ways to measure and determine whether or not something is successful or
Yep.
unsuccessful. um, I think that's really interesting, and this is part of the reason why batting average is not looked at as important as it used to be.
Yeah.
The teams are looking at OPS and OPS plus and
Slugging and all that.
slugging and things like that, because truth is, like we mentioned, the defenders are so good
Yes.
that it's very difficult to put batting average as a something that's in control, truly in control of the performance of a hitter. Like you could go to the plate and hit the ball hard
Get out.
and get out all the time. I mean, the guy who led the league in last year in the lowest amount of strikeouts doesn't necessarily lead the league in batting average because the defenders are so damn good.
Yep.
And that of course I haven't fact checked this. Maybe we should look it up. But that's why I had my laptop out. I got my laptop out because I was like, maybe we'll look up stats, and now it's gone to sleep because we're just
Yeah, we're just talking.
talking. But I'm curious. Let's see here. So let's see if we can find out. So 2022 Major League statistics. This is an indictment on me because you can see that I don't follow baseball, Major League Baseball, close enough to know who won the batting title last year. But let's see here. Let's let this page load. And so let's see here. The Major League Baseball. Okay, so this is both leagues. 326 was the leader of all of Major League Baseball, McNeil for the Mets. Jeff McNeil for the Mets. And
Luis Arias.
Luis Arias was number 4. He was the fourth, 316 for the Twins. Freddie Freeman and Paul Goldschmidt both were ahead of him, 325 and 317 respectively. So if we go and we look at, does this page have I want to see. Ooh, this is an interesting stat. Offensive win percentage.
Oh,
are you familiar with that? I'm not.
I don't think so.
So let me read off the top 5: Judge, Alvarez, Goldschmidt, Freeman, Altuve. Their win percent. Judge's win percentage is .852. So somebody somewhere. Oh, it has a definition. The percentage of games a team with 9 of this player batting would win. That's okay.
That's just a
percentage of games a team with 9 of this player batting would win. Assumes average pitching and defense. It uses the Pythagorean win percentage formula with the players RC/G. I don't even know what that is. For runs scored, and the leagues are per 9 as runs allowed. I don't like that.
It's probably runs game.
That's convoluted.
Runs created per game, I would assume.
Here we go. Okay, this is the one I was looking at. I was looking for at bats per strikeout.
Okay.
Top 5. Arias, 12.7 at bats per strikeout, and he's actually way above the next guy, which is 9.4 at bats per strikeout, which was Stephen Kwan for the Guardians.
Yep.
And then McNeil for the Mets, 8.7.
Yep, there's your 2 batting champions.
Yeah, so I mean, if you have Jeff McNeil was the Major League batting champion, but he's 3rd in at bats per strikeout. Like he struck out at a significantly higher clip than Arias.
Mm-hmm.
But he did have a higher batting average by what was it? 20 points? Yeah, about.
Is it 10 points?
10 points, about 10 points. Now, truth is, 10 points in the grand scheme of things is like not much, but 10 points on your batting average is like what? 20 hits, 10 hits.
Yeah.
I mean, it just depends. But I guess the point I'm getting at here is that, so Freeman, Goldschmidt are both on, that's your 2 and 3 for batting average.
And those guys are usually.
They're not even in the top 10 in at bats per strikeout.
Those guys are more classified power hitters still.
Yeah, neither of those guys are on this list in the top 10 at all. So I think that's really interesting. It goes to show that you can go up there and do damage and get a high batting average without just like bitch slapping the ball in play.
Yep.
Some
days can be your days, and I mean you can poke.
I didn't
5 bloopers in there.
Again, an indictment on me. Benintendi was the 9th best hitter, 304. I did not realize that he was hitting 304 out there. I mean, I knew that Benintendi is one of the top hitters, but that's exceptional.
I think injuries helped him a little bit, but
yeah, maybe so. It's amazing. A lot of these stats, the classic hitter in the major leagues right now that is the sort of antithesis of the old school approach is who? It's Aaron Judge, right? His name is number 1 in a lot of these categories I'm looking at, bro.
Yep.
Like RBIs, he's tied for first. Adjust it here. Let's just read off the categories that Judge is the best number 1 in. Wins above replacement.
Of course.
Offensive wins above replacement. Okay.
Makes
On
sense.
base percentage, slugging percentage, on base plus slugging, runs scored, total bases, home runs. We knew that, 62. That's unbelievable. RBIs, like I said, adjusted OPS plus, runs created, which I don't know how that's.
There she goes.
There she goes. Our camera just died.
That was at 100%. That's funny.
Yeah. Was that 100% charge when we started?
Yeah, I think it was like 89%, but still.
It's freaking amateur hour out here, man. We gotta. Okay, well, our audio's still going. As long as my phone is still going. Yeah, we're good. We're good. We still got audio. We just get you. If you're watching the video, you can just look at Brush react to this. We'll end after this. Adjusted batting runs, batting wins, extra base hits, time on base, offensive win percentage, at bats per home run.
Yep.
9.2. That's insane. Get out of here. Homering every ninth at bat.
That's why you broke the home run record.
That's bananas, man. Win probability added, base out runs added. I don't know what that is. Situational wins added. Championship WPA. I don't know what that is.
I'm a stats guy, and the last three you just rattled off.
I've never even heard of these.
I don't think I've heard of those.
Base out wins added. That's another one. He's number one. And it's funny because, there's probably somebody's going to see this or listen to this and be like, these guys don't know what base out wins added is. And no, I don't.
Good
sorry.
for you, bro. Good for you, bro.
All right. Well, we lost a camera, so we're going to end there. I think that was a good run at it.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody.